Hello, I'm Joshua. That's it. That's the intro.
Okay, fair enough. We were going to discuss the importance of a family, specifically within society. So I guess that's a good lead-on question. Sam, Josh, would you guys like to go first?
Yeah.
Presuming that you guys agree that family
Tell me about the importance of family.
important within society.
No, I don't think it's important to society. That assumes that society presupposes the family, but I do not believe that. I think the bedrock and cornerstone is the family that presupposes society.
So as Margaret Thatcher said, society is just a collection of families.
No, I am not want to quote British people. I'm going to try to find an American.
That's actually based.
I'm just joking.
Well,
I'm joking.
American,
I'm totally joking.
American.
I'm going to give you as much crap
I don't know if I want to quote Margaret Thatcher, though.
No, I think here's the thing is that, again, I'll restate the point that family is not important to society because society does not presuppose family. Family is a bedrock and cornerstone of society, and without it, society does not exist. Family presupposes society. And I would argue, in my worldview, that family is derived of and the ordinary means of grace given by God, and that and faith presupposes family, and family is the institute by which faith is magnified.
I agreed with him up until he said God.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd agree.
So, but you do agree that the family unit presupposes society, and society is just an outpouring of whatever values are held within a family structure or within a microcosm of of a group of right on. Found common ground right off the bat.
Yeah, I'm pretty agreeable actually.
Good to go.
Surprisingly.
Yes. So did you have any objections to that at all? Or?
It depends on how you define as family.
Well,
right?
Presumably we're going
Because really what this is about, at least in my eyes, and coming on to a conservative Christian right-wing show, is that sure, family is important, but to them, family doesn't mean a lesbian couple who adopts a kid, right? They wouldn't, I've asked Sam about this on the show before, they wouldn't have the same rights. And I would want the same rights for those families just as much as I would the traditional nuclear family.
Do you think that a child is entitled to a mother and a father?
I don't think a child's entitled to anything that any the rest of us are not entitled to. So the only human rights that we have are suffering and death.
Interesting choice of words, though.
Right.
But you said you used the word traditional and nuclear, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna disavow the second and concentrate solely on the former.
The term traditional.
Traditional. Like, why do you use that
traditional term? What I mean by that is like, yeah, it's definitely what is considered the norm for a long time.
Okay.
But also not necessarily, because the gays and the gender bending kind of people and those kind of people have been around for thousands of years and have usually been oppressed, and not for any good reasons either. And so we're finally somewhere at a point in humanity's existence where we're willing to tolerate that kind of lifestyle's existence, and they deserve the right to like any other rights that anyone else has. And just because it's not like the norm or whatever doesn't mean that it's worse for a child or what have you to be raised by same gender parents or like the liberal parents who are going to, brainwash your kids or whatever. That's all. So, like, traditional doesn't always mean good, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Slavery is traditional.
Okay. But you would argue... Okay, so tell me where you started disagreeing with me, right? Family presupposes society.
Society, right.
Agreed,
and then you
right?
said...
I just want to establish as much common ground as I understand.
All right.
And then we can kind of dial down on the polemics and the... And the minutia.
So then after that, what did you say? Something
I said family presupposes. I objected to the first comment because I think it framed the question specifically wrongly. Because it said, why is family important to society? And I said, I believe you got that backwards. I think that family presupposes society. And out of the family is an outgrowth of society. Society is just the ordered way that we choose to live and work with, with each other, right?
Sure.
And again, I came over here thinking I was going to open the Bible and talk to a couple. I didn't know I was going to do this. So, like,
fair enough.
You're catching me off guard.
I didn't
I
realize that you didn't know.
Prepared.
So.
I have a coffee cup and I've been up all day.
This is actually a housewarming party.
Okay, fair enough.
And we just turned on some cameras.
Okay, so there's that, but also like you called this podcast a Christian right wing, right?
Sure is.
That would be news to me. I don't know anything about it.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
well.
So like I am a guest just like you are.
Okay. Well, in the context, at least this is what I feel like is
Okay,
like
that's fair.
the
That's
general
fair.
consensus.
But you and me trying to find common ground and see where we delineate and actually have a good conversation about that. That's neither right wing
Sure,
or left
okay.
wing. That's actually just discourse, right?
Okay. Well, let's see.
Since you and I are both ghosts and neither one of us own this,
Right.
and you and I talking, it has
I know
nothing to
it's
do with the
hilarious.
platform more than it does about, okay, let's talk about the content. So you and
Okay.
I agree that family presupposes society.
Okay,
Right? Now,
great
the
start.
definition of family is where you would think that you and I might have some disparity,
How
right?
would you define a family?
Okay, I would define a family as a mother and father first. First as husband and wife.
There's my problem.
Okay, got that. So like I define a family first as husband and wife,
Okay.
and then the progeny of that.
The-
and then
the
it can
children.
go on. There's legacies out there. There's grandparents and everything. And that's a family.
Okay.
That's how I would define a family.
Right.
But that stems out of my biblical worldview. Now, when we argue the polemics and we argue like specifically of what I'm excluding, we're not actually dealing with the subject matter of what about what I said do you disagree with? So like before we move on to, well, what about this and what about this and what about this? What about that is not a family? A husband and a wife and their progeny.
I think it would depend on if they love each other or not.
Okay, well, let's assume, let's presuppose that they do love each other.
Okay, let's make
and then they had children. Is that a family?
Sure.
So what my point is, I'm splitting hairs, but you don't actually disagree with my definition of a family. You just
Sure.
think it's too narrow.
Okay, fair enough.
Is that
Your
an accurate definition
of
of
a family is
it?
too narrow.
Well, no,
Yes.
because I think that's important.
No, I agree with you. That's
think that's
a great
important.
way
So,
of how I would put that, yeah.
In order to, you would argue that your worldview is much wider than mine.
I don't know. It's different.
Well, no, but you're more inclusive in some of your
Sure.
aspects, right?
Sure.
That's a fair definition. And here,
So far.
I would agree with you.
Okay.
Okay, I have a strictly biblical worldview, so I start everything presupposing that the Word of God is inerrant and authoritative in all aspects of life.
Right.
And that's where you and I would get ties. So it shouldn't be a
Absolutely.
surprise to you that I would hold a biblical view of marriage.
I know it's not.
Okay, right? but if I'm being consistent, that's also respectable, right? And if you're being consistent, that's
I
also
suppose,
respectable as
but
well.
only so far.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like the content of my character, of me being consistent and adhering to an authority outside of myself, you could respect that, right?
There's definitely all sorts of aspects about who you are that I could respect. Yeah.
Right, and vice versa,
Sure.
and vice versa.
I'm
And
not trying to make you a villain here.
Oh, no, not at all, not at
Okay.
all. And no, what I'm just laying out some groundwork.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so,
Gotcha.
like, it's not necessarily me that you have an objection with. It would be
Right.
my worldview that you have an objection with.
Correct.
Okay. So I've stated mine. What's yours?
My worldview?
Yeah.
Yeah, we live in a meaningless universe.
Okay.
We are creatures that inherently seek meaning,
Okay.
which is fun and absurd. I don't think there's ever been any actual evidence that the God has ever existed. So, starting with the preposition, or however you say that God exists and that the God in the Judeo-Christian Bible or the Torah or whatever, from whatever specific religion you want to pull from, that's the right one compared to all the other ones without any evidence is, I would say, probably not great to do. Because if enough of you do it, then it normalizes having superstitious beliefs that then go on to breed more superstitious beliefs to where we don't actually have to engage with reality itself at all and then just decide whatever we want to believe is true and then go from there.
So let me ask you this.
Sure.
Because you said there's no evidence for God, right?
Correct.
And I will not argue that because
Okay.
it's pointless. The question I have is, what evidence could happen to you to make you believe?
God himself would have to come. I'd have to see an angel,
Okay.
like without being on some sort of hallucinogen.
Okay.
Like there would have to be some sort of crazy drastic, and even then I would still look at it with some sort of skepticism.
Okay. Stop right there.
Okay.
That second statement is important, right?
Why?
Because you said even then.
Even then.
Even if you define the evidence by which you
So then I
say
guess
that
I
you would be
probably
willing to
have
believe.
have witnesses.
Yeah, and
So
then
it
even
would have
then
to
you'd be
me
skeptical and
like 3 other people.
So very-
and then the even then would be crossed out.
okay. So you continue to close the loop of what would have to happen in order for you to even entertain the idea of believing, right?
Right.
Okay. I'm going to butcher who said this, but it's specifically to the believer, no evidence is needed. To the unbeliever, no evidence would suffice.
I take that back. Actually, any amount of evidence would suffice.
Well, you just said otherwise.
Right. Okay. Here, let me. You're right. Let me backtrack. Let me backpedal here a little bit. If the scientific community came to consensus and said, "We have found evidence that God is real," I believe it.
Okay.
No problem.
Would all of them have to be physicists?
They wouldn't all have to be physicists.
What about
There
all of them have to be
a
neuroscience people?
large amount of physicists.
Biologists? Medical doctors?
Maybe some biologists, maybe some neuroscientists.
Anthropologists?
Probably.
Who all do we throw
whatever.
into that game? The scientific community. That's a broad spectrum descriptor.
Sure.
And so, like, who all do we throw into that particular foray? Who all is included
It
in
would
that
probably
specific
have
group?
to be like some physicists, yeah, that would have to like prove the existence of a space outside of reality and time and space itself, prove that there's a being that exists there, and then prove that it started the universe and controls every aspect of it.
You would need an argument from authority then, right? You would need somebody to exercise their
Not a
standpoint
singular
epistemology.
person authority, but yes, an authority.
An argument from authority. Like you
Some
need a
sort of
group of
authority.
consensus among people to whom you respect and assert their authority to decide things in the metaphysical and the spiritual
Sure.
for you, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Like the
can you
earth
please
being
tell
round.
me the difference of your worldview to mine? You are imprinting that authority onto this group of people, and you would allow them to say yes or no. I give that authority to God himself to define who he is himself, and through his written word to tell me about who he is. So, like, the funny thing is, like, the reality is we're actually not far apart here. It's like you are ascribing authority to an outside, not just yourself. It's different where we end up in that thing. Our target is different, and what we would accept as authority is different. However, if we really boil down to it,
The problem is that your authority isn't real.
okay,
You know what I mean?
right,
Like, there's actual people out there who studied their entire lives in that field of study, in physics and neuroscience,
right,
in these things. And they have, like, generations upon generations of knowledge that they then consume and then progress.
right.
When it comes to religion and Christianity, it definitely shapes and morphs and changes.
How so?
But I don't think abortion wasn't necessarily a topic of discussion in the political realm or in the religious realm.
It was
at all, very
specifically a
much either.
topic of discussion.
Oh, sure.
to the
But then
4th century.
also in the very same Bible that you say that life starts at conception, it doesn't. It says life starts at first breath. And also there's a ritual that a priest can do to have God kill the child of the mother who so dared to have sex outside of wedlock. There's you just go to temple, get the priest, do a God abortion. It's okay if God does it, right? It's not. So, like, it morphs and changes.
So
Progression, no.
I will engage with specific passage and chapter and verse.
Sure.
But I've learned over the years not to engage with descriptions of chapter and verse.
Okay, I'll try to
I'll
find
engage
them
with
for you
specific context like
later. I'll try to find
and
them
that's
for
fair.
you.
I'm gonna
Sure.
if you ever wanted to do that, I'm gonna tell you that I would be willing to sit down with you and do
Right.
that. But like I don't engage with descriptions of scripture. I engage with
Sure.
scripture itself.
Right. So,
So,
that
like-
means I have to have memorized the Bible.
No, you just have to have it on your lap,
Right.
and I'll give you one if you want it.
Yeah, no thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate it, though. I have one on my phone.
No, but okay, if we were going to, like, if we were defining terms, right? You and I would have to define what we're actually talking about, and take the Bible out of it. If we were arguing over whether or not this bucket was orange, we'd have to define what we meant by the bucket. We have to define specifically if we're talking about the same one. We have to define what we mean by orange, right? We'd have to define
Correct.
our terms.
Right.
And when I'm just saying that we have to have the consistent approach to when we're discussing scripture.
You know what's pretty consistent? Science. Science
Do you
Is it?
Do you think?
For the well,
I've seen
It has
some of
its
the most
moments, sure.
incoherent and inconsistent.
Come on,
but it's
brother.
way more consistent than religion.
Okay.
Than religion will ever be. I think.
What is your evidence for that? Because you like evidence. What is the evidence
What's
of
my
the
evidence?
science by itself can't be consistent because it progresses, right?
Right.
Definitionally, it never goes past
Consistently progressing. though.
it never goes
Right?
past the idea of hypothesis, right?
What do you mean?
Because here's the thing, the philosophy of science.
Okay.
Now, I'm not a butcher this. My point is science at its best is always bringing in new data and being willing to be wrong.
Yeah.
So you saying consistent is like, okay, if science was 100%
Consistently
consistent,
willing to be wrong.
well, if it's a moving target, because if science couldn't be consistent,
Isn't religion?
no.
How is religion not a moving target?
Well, what do you mean that it is?
Okay.
I'm defining why I say science is consistently evolving, right?
Religion
Has to.
Like, let's take the Bible, for example.
Yeah.
Could be interpreted a million different ways, depending on what passage you're looking at and in what context and whatever, no matter what religion it is.
Do you think that there's not an ordered way to read Shakespeare?
There's definitely okay, that's art,
Okay.
not science. Just making that
But what
clear.
I'm saying,
And what-
literature, right? There's
why
an
that
ordered way to read it,
matters.
right?
Why the fact that it's art matters is because we could take in the artist's intent on how we were supposed to read it.
Okay.
But also,
But the artist's intent
sometimes
matters?
you don't have the artist's intent.
The authorial intent matters?
The artist's intent sometimes doesn't matter. Sometimes the artist doesn't give away what their perceived interpretation of their own
does
art
the
is.
author and audience
it's-
matter when you know who it's being spoken to?
What do you mean? Wait, what?
So if I know who the author is
Okay.
and I know who they're speaking to, at what
Okay.
time they're doing, and historically what's happened, if I have context, clarity, purpose, and implementation,
That's
if
what
I have the
matters.
four things of what's happening in the biblical narrative, and I apply that type of hermeneutic, that consistent way of reading the Bible,
Right.
by understanding that, how is it any different than
If
what I
you're
read?
doing that with the Bible, then I don't think that you.
Brother, I'm just going to say this as an aside. Literally every week, there are faithful pastors that are spending hours upon hours upon hours unpacking, looking at the language, and literally doing that each week before they step behind a pulpit to expose the written word to their gathered believers. That's what they do. That's what they're trained to do. That's what everybody does, whoever is called to preach. They literally are looking at every single time, and they're examining. They're looking at the history of what great thinkers before them actually talked about this passage. They're seeing it, and they're not trying to come up with something new. They're simply trying to expose what's there, not their own interpretation. They're trying to expose what's there.
Right.
So, like, how can you take it to somebody to be an expert, perhaps, on Shakespeare or
Because
Kant or anybody else, any other philosopher, any great writer or art? But the same standard would be applied to somebody reading the
right,
biblical
but
text.
we don't hold religion to the same standard as art.
What standard do you hold art to?
Well, it's subjective, right? To some degree or whatever. You're allowed
Literature,
to not like that art.
literature is subjective.
Well, like Shakespeare, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you can sit there and say that you don't like Shakespeare all day long. That's fine.
No, your opinion about it can be subjective, but
my opinion about religion isn't the same thing. We're not talking about the same thing when it comes to art and religion.
okay. So,
But apples and oranges here.
What about
because-
literature? Like, what about approaching a written word, right?
Okay.
And making sure that you're being faithful to authorial intent and actually exposing and explaining what's there as opposed to the way you want it to say. How's that different?
How is that different?
So if I approach the Bible that way, and I'm simply trying to
Because
explain,
you have to approach the Bible as far as a pastor goes. You have to approach the Bible that way with the presupposition that God exists
yeah,
and that what the Jews 2,000 years ago wrote down was correct in every single possible way, right?
yeah, you have to,
You have to have faith that these people knew what they were talking about, and what they were talking about, you have to have faith that that will apply to us 2,000 years down the road. But sometimes it just doesn't.
Okay, when?
when it comes to how a family should probably be structured.
Okay. What is the necessary
The
evidence for that?
science behind that
What-
shows that
Give me the science.
that the non-traditional nuclear family generally has no actual drastic downsides. So if you had gay parents, then you're not like disenfranchised or whatever. Like you're not like missing out on anything.
I think we're bouncing around a bit, right?
And
And to bounce around again, like because
It's hard to stay on topic on this political show for me.
yeah, I get it. That's fair.
It's a little overwhelming.
That's fair. And
But
also,
like
and
that
also,
idea of family, you said strictly comes, well, not strictly, but it comes from your biblical understanding, right?
yeah, as does my understanding of morality,
Right.
Ethics. Everything that I have comes from my biblical worldview. Yeah.
Right. Instead of what is happening on right now, what
Okay.
people are discovering today.
I don't
Right.
think there's anything new under the sun.
Sure, you could make an argument that the straight line wasn't like discovered when we looked at the horizon or whatever. But like, yeah,
I don't
there's
think
new
anything
things
that's happening right now is surprising to God.
under the presupposition that God exists.
Again, this is going to be really offensive, so I apologize. ahead of
Please
time.
be offensive.
I don't want to be offensive. I think it's here. I think I kind of ambushed you. I didn't know I was coming on the show, and we don't know each
I
other.
didn't
But I
know
have
that.
really enjoyed talking to you. So
Yeah, no, it's fun.
and I want to be gracious here like that. But
I'm not going to be easily offended. Is really what I'm saying.
fair point. And I'm not going to say anything hopefully offensive. Hopefully, what I'm saying is I do believe that you actually know there's a God.
That's cute. That's fun.
Okay, I believe that you're
Why do you
suppressing
think
the
that?
truth with unrighteousness.
Why do you think that?
I do believe that in your being like I believe that you know there's a God. I think that you appeal to authority, you appeal to logic, you appeal to all these things that actually would borrow from my worldview, not yours. And I do believe this. And I'm not going to traditionally argue with about the existence of God. I mean, I'd love to have that conversation with you and me in a coffee shop and out cameras. I'm not afraid of it, but I'm saying is
I
like
work
I'm
at
not
one. It's
I'm not
real
going to
great.
perform. What's that?
I said I work at a coffee shop.
Okay.
I'll get you a free coffee.
I would love to do that. And anytime you want to, I mean, that's an open-ended offer, brother.
Hell yeah, dog.
Seriously. I would
No
love
problem.
to.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry about the audience or how you're appearing or anything like that. But I believe that deep in your heart that you know there's a God.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was
It was
raised.
true when you heard it
can
before.
sniff out the Christian raised boy that's in me. Is what I think that is.
I look at everybody like that, though. I don't look at just you. I'm not making
you
a
think
judgment call.
everyone believes that God is, but they're
I
like is real, but
believe
they're
the
suppressing
heavens declare the glory of God. I believe
it. I don't know what
that
that really means when you say it.
I believe that everything that you look at displays God's glory.
Okay,
Every single thing.
great.
Every
But
advancement and everything that you see declares God's glory.
I think that people who say that are looking for God in things
Yeah.
where it's not there.
Okay. I believe
Sorry.
that. So
I
here's-
just, superstitious beliefs, I think, just have there's problems. There's problems with superstitious beliefs. Believing that God exists is a superstitious belief. It philosophically, the Christian God has so many issues with it.
okay.
Just in its existence of itself.
Okay.
Like, how can God be perfectly all powerful, all knowing, and all good and allow human suffering? You say, well, free will, right? Free will. God gave us free will so we could be with God. But if God needed companionship, he could have just created companionship. But he wanted to create a companionship with free will. He could still have created companionship with free will without causing suffering because he's all powerful and good.
Okay.
There's no excuse for human suffering if God fits these
A
traits.
lot going on there. You done that whole idea of theodicy. What do bad things happen to good people?
Right. Why do bad things happen?
I'm going to quote you R.C. Sproul, right?
Okay.
Because he's smarter than me. Ready? You ready?
Sure.
That only happened once.
What do you mean?
The only time a bad thing happened to a good person was once, and he volunteered. That was Jesus. It wasn't me. None of us here are inherently good, and I think that's. Let me reframe the question here. All of us are dead in our trespasses and sin. We're dead in our sin. We're not inherently good. Our utter.
I'd agree that we're not inherently good, but I would believe that good is a human construct.
Okay, so I got to fight with you for a moment.
All right, great. Objective good. I love it.
No, what I'm saying is that at one point, if you say, why does human suffering happen? I'm going to ask you by what metric? If I this in the same breath, you can say, there's no such thing as good or bad.
Well, any human suffering, subjective suffering, objectively good.
Well, why is it bad then? By what metric?
Human beings didn't exist.
But you can't be objective
Or
and subjective
sentience
and then,
didn't exist?
completely.
A sun blows up, that's not good or bad. A sun forms, that's not good or bad. A planet blows up or forms, that's not good or bad. Right? We're sentient beings. Good and bad come from us. We decide what's good and bad. If the planet blows up and we feel bad about it, that's now bad.
But you've said superstition is bad.
How's that superstition? My feelings are not
you said superstition. You said my belief
Right.
about family is bad by
Right.
your definition.
Wait, what?
You
Your
said
definition of
people
family
did.
is
I heard
narrow.
that right? I heard that if people having superstitions and acting upon them is not good, is what you said
Correct.
about 3 minutes
Sure.
later. So
I would say
by what standard? And here's the
by-
question: if there is no good or bad, right? So what?
If there's no
Because the
good or
truth is,
bad.
like, if there's no good or bad, and you don't believe in it, but inherently within your being, you do know that there's a good or a bad. You do know there's good or evil. You know that.
May I amend what you are seeing as a contradiction here? Objectively, there's no good and bad. Subjectively, as far as the human consensus goes, there are some things that generally most people would say are good, and generally most people would say are bad. We live like good and bad exist. We all agree that like we live like good and bad exist, right?
No, I mean,
But
you
if
just
there's
argue
no
to consensus.
sentience,
No,
if
you
there's
argue
no
to consensus.
tree in the forest, or if there's no one around to hear the forest fall in the trees, doesn't make a noise.
But
There's no sentience to decide what is good or bad. There is no good or bad.
You're flip flopping between two particular philosophical arguments. The question of whether something is good or bad, right? You say it's completely subjective, and then you argue that it's by consensus. Agreed or no? You say we have a consensus of what we
A
believe
subjective consensus.
is a
or
subjective
whatever.
consensus. Great. Okay.
Right. It's not objectively out there for us to discover.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
There is no moral law.
Not objectively. We create the moral law.
So okay, so by that reasoning,
Okay.
if enough of us propagate over time, and I don't mean physically, I'm just saying, let's say something happened tomorrow and a lot of people held to a biblical worldview, let's say 90% of the globe,
Sure.
and the consensus was these morals are good.
Okay.
Are we right? Based on your worldview, because the consensus says that we're good,
Oh,
and would
I
you
think
have to
10% of
accede
you would
to the
disagree.
accede to the consensus? But then you wouldn't call it good, would you?
Well, it depends on what side I'm on.
Okay.
Am
Well,
I
right
on
now
the
it's clear
10%
what side
side or
you're
the
on.
90% side.
But I mean, you just said that you don't believe in God, so let's
Right.
assume.
So I'm on the other side.
Okay, wait, on the other side, so you say, so is there good or bad? And you say if it's by consensus, then that particular example would say that what we say is good and what you say is bad, right?
Right.
That's ridiculous.
But it also depends on history. So-
hear me out though, but you
What
keep
do you
on
mean? Why is that ridiculous?
the idea that morality would come by consensus.
Why wouldn't it? Oh, it's objective. It's by a case basis. And even then, subjectively, people could look at the case.
Can you tell me one evil thing right now?
One evil thing.
Yeah.
Well, you could say that torching of babies for one's own amusement is objectively bad, but I would say that someone who does that and doesn't see it as objectively bad wouldn't say it's bad.
There's no existence under heaven that you actually believe that torturing a baby
No, of course I don't.
is
But that's
is good.
me.
I
It's
know-
objective.
I got it.
But I believe
where
that
does
there's
that come
someone
from?
out there who
where does
believes
that
that it's good.
innate understanding of that come from?
What do you mean?
Of you knowing.
Because
You specifically.
human beings are built to be
Did you
empathetic.
decide?
Biologically, we are meant to care about each other. Biologically, because we're social creatures. That's where that comes from. Because it was evolutionarily advantageous for us to care about each other. That's where that comes from. That's why morality is
a
a
whole
thing.
lot going on here, man.
Yeah, I know. I'm a lot, aren't I?
No,
it's exhausting.
You're not exhausting.
I'm exhausting to me.
Okay,
So,
like,
but thank you.
I'm enjoying it. But
I'm glad.
I do really want to drill down on one point.
Okay.
Why do you believe it would be bad to harm a child?
Why do I believe it'd be bad to harm a child? Because I'm empathetic. Because I know what it's like to be a child, and I know what it's like to be harmed by as a child.
Every adult knows what it's like to be a child.
Right.
Not everybody holds to your worldview. So where does it come from?
What? Nature and nurture, dog. Nature and nurture. genetics and environment.
Okay, so let's say that I was a person who wasn't raised by anybody and grew up in the system, and I didn't have that nature or nurture, and I arrived at the same conclusion.
You still would have some amount of nature and nurture.
But where would it come from? What if all I knew was pain? What if all I knew was pain? What if I had a horrible, horrible childhood and a horrible existence up until a point where I would tell you I was rescued from that, from myself and from my sin. But I mean, you could describe it some other way. But what would lead, if all of a sudden I came to the conclusion that this was wrong and my former life was sin, what would cause that?
Some sort of drastic life experience, probably.
Oh. What would change a person from that? What would have a person turn from their sin? What would have a person...
What truly changes a man? What truly changes someone?
God.
You would say God. I would say, oh yeah, it's nothing short of a miracle, that's for sure. But I wouldn't say it's God.
See, I think that you're borrowing from my worldview, man.
I don't think I am. I think
Use
I just grew
terms
up
like
in America in the
miracle
Bible Christian conservative
but
belt line, and
I
I have a lot of jargon that comes from
But
that.
you've met a lot of people, right?
I
And you work at a coffee shop. You
more
probably
or less
meet
than
a
any
lot of people, right?
normal people. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and
There are a lot of conservatives there.
okay, but like take conservative, all that other stuff out. Take all the
Labels,
political out of this for a moment.
Sure.
No, what I'm
A lot of people
take all the politics out of it for just one moment.
Okay.
And let me ask this like that, because I'm only concerned
With my soul.
I can't save you, brother.
I know, but like you sure are trying.
I'm not trying to save you.
Something.
Listen. Any Christian that ever tells you that they can save you,
I know,
or convert you,
I can't. It's only through the power of Jesus Christ. And
no. Every Christian is in advertising. Their father handles sales.
Okay.
Our job is only to point to Christ.
Got it.
And we know he does all the work. But what I'm concerned about is this: I find you to be intelligent. I do.
Thank you.
I do, and I think
I find you to be intelligent.
I think you're interesting.
Solidarity amongst Joshuas.
That's fair. But I think you're interesting. But what I'd love to drill down on is to stay on topic on one of these things.
Okay. What one thing would you like to stay on topic of?
Again, where does the notion of your conception of good or evil come from?
Nature and nurture, dog.
Yeah, but like nature, okay, nurture would assume that it's given to you from somebody else. Nature would say it's innate and you're born with it or as a result of your experiences.
No,
I give you an example of neither one of those taking place, but yet arriving at the same conclusion.
There's
and I
nothing
wonder,
else, though.
What's that?
There's nothing else, though.
There's nothing else.
You say that there's something else. There's nothing else on a secular worldview. Nature and nurture is what defines your personality.
Okay.
What
So it's
kind
an
of
argument from
genetics
silence.
Were you born with?
It's an argument from silence then.
What do you mean?
It means it's an argument because there's nothing else. It's an argument from silence. It's an argument because I don't have any other explanation, so it must be this. That's honestly what Christians get accused of all the time. Out of the
but
gaps
you're
and everything.
accusing me of that for
I'm actually accusing of it right now because you're arguing for,
because
I
I'm not
asked you where your
applying God
morality
into
comes
the
from.
situation here.
I'm pointing to where mine happens.
Yeah,
You don't agree with my
nothing.
explanation, but like I believe that I was born in sin. I believe that I was utterly
But
depraved.
sin is
And
a concept. Oh, go ahead.
So I believe I was born with a heart of stone, right? And when the Lord regenerates me, He gives me a heart of flesh, and I'm not even able to seek after Him until He regenerates me. I believe that I turned and I can only look at Him because He first chose me, because He first rescued me from my sin. Now I'm still a sinner, and I fail Him every day. And the only good that comes from me is by the work of the Spirit. Now, my question for you though, you're still inherently subject, even if you don't want to be, to King Jesus. You're still subject to it. You're still subject to His law, and His law is written on your heart. And you do know what is evil. You do. You know it's disgusting for a man to force himself upon a woman. It's disgusting. It's sin. It's evil in every respect.
Sure.
And you wouldn't need anybody to tell you to do that because you'd know it. You know that it would be evil for you to harm a child. Evil. Beyond evil. But you know that inherently. And it's not just nurture and nature and
You
your
think
empathy.
this is in everyone?
What's that?
You think this is in everyone?
I do believe it is in everyone. I do believe it. And I believe those that would argue against are suppressing the truth with their unrighteousness. And just the way that they deny the presence of God in their life. Like you use terms like miracle. And I guarantee there's things within your life and you're like, I don't know where this comes from, or the impetus you have, or the inclination you have to love people or to help people or to do, and not all just good works. I'm not saying like it's all just being nice and charity. What I'm saying is there's a part of you that seeks after God. There's a part of you that knows that he's missing within your life when you deny him. And I'm not using the right words here. What I'm saying is
that sounds about right.
no, but you do know that there's a God. You do know that morality comes outside of yourself, and there's an objective lawgiver, and there's an objective person who defined morality outside of you, and it is written on you. And the truth of the matter is you can't define it anymore. Like, you can try to, or you can argue from the gaps, you can argue from silence, but the truth of the matter is you know it's objectively evil. You do. You know that the two examples I gave you, whether a man forcing himself on a woman,
Right.
or harming a child, or if I punched you in the face
But
right now, that would
there's
be
people
evil.
That
out
would not
there
be epic.
Yeah,
who would say that's not a problem.
that's
Plenty
my
of
point.
people-
Why do they all say that's not a problem? Why
don't
does
they all
anybody say that? Why is there consensus, to use your word, generally over, or more specifically, over like rape? We all agree that that's bad, right? It's evil. Where does
Not
that
all
come
of us,
from?
Obviously. Because it still happens.
But the law and society
What law?
and all of us, by using your definitions earlier, there is consensus amongst the world.
There's some consensus about some things.
Okay, rape. Do you think there's consensus about that?
Obviously not, because it still happens.
No, that's not the reason it's still happening. There's evil people
No,
that are still
there's
doing it. But there's
entire
consensus about
countries
that have
don't
made it.
persecute people who do that.
Okay, but do you think that there's consensus about whether or not that's wrong? Because you argued that would be a good way to shape morality earlier. If the consensus came to you and said that,
Sure,
from
if
the
I took a poll of every single person on the entirety of the
and you
planet
asked them, is
and
it
asked them
okay
that
for a
question-
man to rape a woman?
Right, and if
what do you think's going
and
to come
I'm
back?
pretty sure you're right. They would all agree
Yeah.
that like that's probably wrong. Now ask them about 1,000 years ago and get a survey from then. I'm think that
That's
maybe
an argument.
probably
That's a useless paradigm because neither one of us can go there.
Maybe all I'm saying is that people from about 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, or any time frame you
Mm-hmm.
want to take it, or whatever, there's not going to be a similar consensus.
What if we took it and didn't make it so drastic? What if I posted a video of a man kicking a puppy?
What?
How many likes?
I think the drastic thing would.
Yeah,
work
everybody
better for
would
the
say that that's
argument
wrong,
than the
right?
Not drastic.
My
thing.
point is that everybody has a knowledge of what's right or wrong.
It seems to me that there's kind of this. You're saying that the existence of evil disproves objective morality.
No, it disproves an objectively good God.
The fact that evil exists disproves whether or not something is right or wrong.
No, that God is right or wrong.
Mm-hmm. He's arguing about. He's saying if there's a God, he's not good.
Yeah.
He's either not good, not powerful, or not all knowing.
That's what he's arguing. Either an impotent God or no God at all, right?
At least ain't that one. It at least ain't the one being described to me in my church Bible Sunday say classes. That. It ain't no Christian God that I've heard of, that's for sure.
Okay.
That's all.
And it really comes down to the old question of why do bad things happen to good people?
Why do bad
Because you
things
believe
happen to good
inherently
people?
people are good.
No, I don't believe people are inherently good or bad. I think everyone has their own blessings and curses, to
So-
use more Christian jargon.
We've spoken around the circle, and I've asked to define these terms. Why do bad things? I said, what's a bad thing? Then I've asked what evil is,
It
and I've
depends
asked
on-
wrong things, and then good
If something
people. I try to
okay.
define these things, but I don't feel like you have a
how about this?
definition.
How about this? Let me give you an analogy, right? So, a father goes to like a family psychiatrist or something, and he goes, "My son has all these problems, right? He has so many problems, right? He's out drinking all the time. He's spending all my money. He's this, and he goes, sounds like your son doesn't have enough problems. Sounds like your son doesn't have any problems at all, and that you should probably give your son some problems because he's spending all your money, drinking all your booze, and he's going out with girls all the time, and it's not learning the values you want him to learn or whatever. To that son, it would be bad. Suffering happens when his allowance gets cut and he gets grounded or whatever. And that to that kid, that's bad. That's still suffering. We have to, and then on the other end, the father suffering because the kid isn't living up to his expectations. And now even more suffering. Now the father has to do something that he never wanted to do with his son, which is punish him or whatever. No matter what way you want to slice it, the Buddhists had it right. Life is suffering. We eat things to consume things to further our own perpetual growth for no actual reason at all other than just to do it to perpetuate suffering. And so there's no possible way that there could be an objectively good God out there with all powerful or all knowing.
So, do you think
Nothing.
suffering is inherently bad?
Oh, and that's the thing. Again, with the subjectivity, you're going to suffer. Bad happens. So, sure, we could sit there and say that, like, objectively bad exists only due to the fact that life exists and life suffers,
So if I said to you,
according to the perspective of life.
so if I was talking to you and I legitimately said, count it all joy, brother, when you meet trials of various kinds.
Wait, what?
If I said that to you, I said, count it all joy. Like, be happy when you meet trials of various kinds. Like, when you meet suffering of various kinds.
Uh-huh.
And I say, because the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Right?
Oh, I would probably compare that with the story of Sisyphus.
Right.
You know the story of Sisyphus?
I do.
Where he got condemned to push the boulder up the hill or whatever.
Yep.
The gods condemned. So, Camus, the absurdist philosopher, said that we are all like Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the hill, suffering. The gods condemned Sisyphus to push the boulder up the hill. The gods did not condemn Sisyphus not to try to find joy and meaning in it.
So
Same kind of philosophy
you go
there,
from
I'd say.
Camus or Sisyphus to Camus.
Well,
right?
Camus quoted or mentioned Sisyphus.
Yeah. You read The Stranger by Camus?
No, I haven't read the whole thing. I've just watched a lot of videos about Camus and his ideas.
Read The Stranger.
Okay, sure. I know Camus has his issues as well, but I like his worldview.
I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying read his book.
Okay,
Because
sure.
I did.
I'll read it to the
several
reading
times, and
list.
it's,
I'll let you know if I read it.
It's a little rough.
Yeah,
It's a little rough.
yeah.
He has a lot going on. He has a lot of he has a lot of thoughts.
Well, I mean, this is a class of philosophy called that's part of it, existentialism, which is a whole mess in and of itself. So
Okay,
it's
fair enough. Agreed on another point.
Yeah.
So if I told you, though, if I did say, count it all joy, when, not if, you meet trials of various kinds, if I said that to you, I said, so if I said that to my daughters, if I said, as young as they are, I said, I need you to count it all joy. You're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And I, from my worldview, and I'm going to tell you from our faith, and I understand it, because we're told, Christians are told we are going to suffer.
Yeah,
Not that we might suffer, but that we will
Well,
suffer.
we should
for Christ's sake.
rejoice in that suffering, right?
No, they rejoice because, listen, the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Each thing, because we only look at ourselves, but the Lord is preparing for us specifically for other things. And it's all toward his kingdom. So I might not have resolution in the instant of understanding why this is happening. But I understand it, and it's been proven true over and over and over again through my small time on this earth like that the Lord's plan for me is better than the plan I have for myself. And that's included a lot of suffering. So like a great amount of suffering. So my question is suffering inherently bad?
Yes,
Okay.
sure. But also no. Because suffering is required for the advancement of the human race. Now, is the human race inherently bad? I don't know. I mean, it depends on what perspective you're looking at, right?
So I feel like we're playing ping pong, then
I'm
tennis,
not
and then
trying to play
racquetball.
ping pong with you.
I know.
You're trying to sit there and be
I'm
like,
asking
is
a
suffering
specific
bad?
question.
Suffering can be good because it builds character, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess.
I didn't say it built character.
Well, whatever. It builds you closer to God, which means the same
But
thing.
you said
to me.
human suffering was the reason that you could not believe in a good God. I'm asking a different stake. And then you
Okay.
also, then afterwards, after you said that, you said human suffering is necessary for the human condition just a minute ago.
Yeah, it's necessary. for
Okay,
the
so it's
advancement of
necessary,
the
but it
human race.
disproves God. My point is,
Yeah.
let's see how we go back and forth. It's a bit of a
It still
contradiction.
disproves God. It's necessary for the advancement of the human race because the universe is structured in such a way that life is suffering.
Okay.
And so it doesn't have to be that way if there is a perfectly all-powerful, good, all-knowing God that could stop it at any point and chooses not to.
It is interesting the way we bounce back and forth.
So, like, you see what I mean? Where it's like,
No.
it's inherently built into life itself that life will suffer. If there is a God that exists that could stop that suffering at any point and is supposedly all good, all knowing, and all powerful, then suffering would stop
How do you
Logically.
suppose he would do that?
with his all powerful
See,
ways.
that's a platitude. But I wonder, because you make this declarative statement that if he was good, he would do this.
If good and bad is objective.
No, but you said if
Right.
God is good, according
God
to you,
is good.
by your definition, let's
It is-
assume that you're right about
Right.
everything.
Okay.
Let's assume that your definition is the universal one.
Sure.
And by your definition, if God was good, there would be no human suffering.
Correct.
Okay.
Or and all powerful and all knowing. Because without one of these three aspects, human suffering, you can make a case for. If God didn't know everything, then he wouldn't know how to stop human suffering, even though he had all power and is all good. if he didn't have all power, he didn't know how to stop human suffering, but couldn't do anything. It wasn't powerful enough to do anything about it. And was still good enough to want to do something about it. Human suffering will still exist. Same thing with the other one. So it's like, but it's all three of those at the same time that can exist and also human suffering. There's no logical way you could work your way out of that box. At least to me.
So I feel like I need a whiteboard. Like I want to.
Yeah, sure.
I want to get these points and like dial in on one of them.
I have one like
Yeah,
right there.
I want to dial in on one of them and then deal with that before we go to the others. Because now we have a different metaphysic we're arguing. Other than
Because then-
the suffering argument that you have, then you bring into whether or not he's omniscient, all powerful,
Yeah.
right, or all knowing.
Right.
So omniscient is all knowing, right, or is
Or
all powerful, and is whether or not you're good.
omnipresent, omnipotent, and what?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Point is that you don't believe he is all powerful and he doesn't know the future.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think that God exists within time?
I don't think God exists at all. Depends on what you define as God.
Okay,
but I don't think
so
it's
I mean, do you think that
anything
the biblical worldview would say that God exists inside of time?
God exists inside of time? If you're talking to Christian anarcho Josh back in the day, I wasn't an anarchist or an atheist, I would say no, God would exist outside of time.
Okay.
Because
So
God
if
would have
that-
to exist outside of time to perceive
Right.
all of time in and of
So
itself.
there would not be, he wouldn't know what's going to happen. He would be
No.
lord over it. And time wouldn't exist outside of him because the truth of the matter, that means time would be above him,
Time, yeah.
right? He doesn't react to time because he reacts to nothing.
Time
All
is in
things
his
produced from his
hands,
will, right?
Essentially.
Yeah. So, okay.
And human suffering exists.
Then that would mean that human suffering would be under his sovereign hand, right?
Is part of his plan, yeah.
Okay. And your problem with that is what?
His plan doesn't have to involve human suffering if he's all powerful.
By
That's my
what
problem.
standard are you saying this?
By what standard?
Yeah, but by what metric does that ever anywhere true? Like, why would it? Why doesn't it?
Why doesn't it?
Let me argue from silence. Why doesn't it have to involve suffering?
Why doesn't it? Because if God's all powerful and all good and all powerful and all knowing,
There it is. Because you believe that suffering is inherently bad, right? Like you said a moment ago.
is
Because
suffering not
if he was
inherently
good,
bad?
there would be absence of suffering.
If you believe that objectively good and objectively bad exist, then how is suffering not objectively bad?
Because what might cause me pain in the temporary might produce long-lasting implication to expand God's glory later and bring glory, and might cause
And it's set up that
immense
way.
joy for him. Like,
It doesn't have to be that way. But it doesn't have to be that way.
by what standard do you say
By
that?
God's all powerful nonsense
No,
that
but
you people say that he has.
What you say it doesn't have to be that way.
Because he's all powerful and all knowing and all good.
Right.
If he's all powerful and all knowing and all good, he doesn't have to structure the world where human suffering has to be a thing. Human suffering is bad. It's like Jesus Christ suffered on the cross. That was bad. That sucks for him. He even like pleaded, like, God, please don't let me do this. This is
No,
gonna
that's not what he
suck."
said. Lord, he said, if I could,
Or
I would
what-
have.
if he-
I would
if
ask
I
anything,
could, I
take this
wouldn't
cup
do it,
from me,
'cause
but not my will, but yours be done.
Essentially,
No. He didn't plead not to do it. He said, if I could.
if I could. As in if there's any way. If there's any
No,
way.
not if there's any way. You're
Wasn't
misreading.
it if there was any way?
No,
Am I
this isn't like
mistaken?
that. Take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done. He went there knowing what would happen and knowing what would do, and he went there on his own 2 feet, not being forced.
I know. But he knew it was going to
He
suck.
just- you know why?
He was going to suffer, right?
Yeah, he knew he
He
was
was
going
going
to
to
suffer
suffer.
for all of the sins
And
of
it
the faithful.
didn't have to be that way.
Did have to be.
No,
that
it
way.
didn't.
Yes, it did.
I don't believe
Well,
it did.
something has to be given in order for
Why?
something to be received.
God said so?
Yes.
Well, no, that's
Why?
basic.
Who gave God the authority?
God. See what
Wow,
you're talking
you see
about?
how that's a problem?
No, I don't. But my point is, like, you keep arguing like something like there's an ultimate truth, but you don't believe in ultimate truth.
No, that's
you
the
believe it
problem.
doesn't
You
have to be
believe in
suffering.
ultimate truth, and I'm trying to use that ultimate truth to show you that doesn't work. It doesn't work the ultimate truth that God exists and that He loves you, because He doesn't, or human suffering wouldn't be a thing.
But again, you're arguing from nowhere with that. That's
Parents would want not. They want their children to suffer not and want for nothing, most of the time, right? I would want ourselves.
This is
I
projection.
Want for not or
It's
nothing.
not an argument. It's projection.
What do you mean? How is it?
It's not an argument. It's projection.
How is human suffering good? I mean, I understand that you're like, well, it could lead to good things, but in
Okay.
itself, in and of itself, isolated.
Were you
in a
ever
box,
allowed?
in a
Were you
vacuum,
were you
is
ever
bad.
allowed to fail as a child?
Was I allowed to fail? I mean, I
Sometimes.
dropped out of high school and got my GED. Does that
So did
count?
I, and I got a college degree now. And who
That's-
cares? My point is, were you ever allowed to fail when you were little?
I don't know. Yes.
You were allowed to fall and
Sure.
scrape your knee from time to time,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. And then it hurt, and I was suffering.
But do you think your parents ever allowed you to fail sometimes so that you could learn the lesson?
And my parents didn't create the universe of the laws of it, though.
I'm just using a small example as a microcosm like that. You're completely throwing out everything with God because of one thing you don't like, and it's a projection because you don't like it.
There's other things.
I got it, but my point is, your big argument: if there's suffering in the world, there's no God.
Right. It's just the one thing
It's pedantic, but okay. Look,
It's pedantic,
were you
though.
ever allowed to suffer as a child
Yes.
for your own good by your parents' decision, even though you couldn't understand it at
Sure.
the time?
Sure.
And I'm arguing this way. It's kind of a generalized argument. It doesn't hold much water. But my point is, do you think God ever allows us to suffer?
Yeah. If
For our
God is
good.
real, then yeah,
For
he
his great
absolutely
glory.
allows it.
Okay. What's the problem with it, though? And
problem
knowing
is-
his ultimate plan,
is
knowing
that
what he brings
your
all things
analogy
together for his own good.
With the parents and the child does not apply to an all-powerful being like a God that exists outside of time and space. Another thing that I'd like to harp on, just to kind of shift gears, because I feel like we're going back and forth in the same two directions, is that we don't have any free will if God exists outside of time and space. There's no possible way that we could have any sort of free will if all of our actions have already been determined. It's called determinism, and it's definitely applicable if you believe in an objective God that lives outside of objective time and space. Because there's no... God knows if I'm going to hell. God allowed me to go to hell. God knew I would pick not to join Christianity, and he allowed me to go to hell. That's such a good God who's all good and all knowing and all powerful. No, there's no possible way.
He knew that you were obviously going to go to hell, correct?
So
but
the
you
free
were
will
given the
versus
choice.
determinism, I love that argument.
Yeah.
I love it. I do. I love that argument because it assumes that God is forcing people to hell, right? But
Is it not?
well, the thing is, like, do you believe that I can choose him, that I'm not already going to hell? We are fallen in sin.
Yeah.
We are slaves to our sin. He rescues us from ourselves. You are born with a nature to sin. No more. Listen, the lion could technically subside on plant-based protein shakes, right?
I mean, sure. But it wasn't
technically.
built to.
Okay, again, this is a ridiculous thing to say. I get it, but technically,
Okay, I'm glad
he
you
could
know.
go down to GNC, and if that even exists anymore, I don't know. One point is, get some protein powder. He doesn't have to kill the gazelle,
Right.
but that's not. Is he gonna start eating oranges or tree bark? Is he gonna all of a sudden eat other stuff that might subside him, or is he gonna appeal to his nature? Okay, same thing
Vegans
like
do
that.
it.
Our chicken's gonna all of a sudden start eating cows. What about cows start eating other cows? They have a
Cows
nature.
do that, but
Yeah, but they have a nature, right?
right, sure.
We have a nature as well. Ours is to sin.
I do agree.
And we're not
but
ever going to go outside.
sin's a
You want to talk
Christian
about free
concept.
will. You have free will past the point. You're not going to go against your nature. You have to
What
be
is-
rescued from
now
that
you
nature.
Walked right into one of philosophy's greatest questions, Josh. What is human nature?
I think it's been answered like that. We have a sin nature.
Right. You think the answer to what is human nature has been answered, or the question to what is human nature has been answered?
Yeah, I'm not.
Right.
I'm not.
That's another problem. No, it absolutely has not.
Okay, I'm telling you what I think. I'm telling you how I would answer that question. I believe that we have, from our first breath, a sin nature. I believe that we're inherently fallen in Adam. I believe in original sin. I believe that we are utterly depraved and we run and no one seeks after God. No, not one. No one is righteous. No, not one. I believe that we utterly run screaming from him. He rescues us from ourselves, from our sin, and points us to him. He takes our heart of stone and gives us a heart of flesh. That's regeneration. So I don't believe that, like, I can choose him. And talk about free will. My free will, when I exercise it, is to sin. He thwarts my free will by making me look at him, by helping me to worship him. I don't believe my free will, me exercising my free will, is always going to choose the selfish, depraved, sinful nature that I'm born with. If I take consequence away right now, I mean, it evidence all of human history. We're depraved. We seek after our own self. We're selfish. We're conceited. We look to idolatry. Every chance that we get,
And God allowed it.
he rescued us from it.
Oh, but he allowed it to be there to begin with.
Yeah, okay, and we are his creation.
like
Everything's
Stockholm.
under his sovereign hand, but he rescues us from it. That's the miracle.
But he put it there to begin with.
He put there.
He allowed it to happen.
Sure.
And then rescued you from it, like some sort of like, oh, look at me, I did it. But like, you're the one who started the fire to the first place that I had to be rescued from. You know what I mean? So like, is it rescuing if he's the one who started the house fire to begin with and then saved me from it?
Okay. Do you agree with me that we have a sinful nature?
I don't know. Okay. My problem is that you use the term sinful like it's like if I agree with you that there's things in human beings that cause us to be selfish and greedy or whatever and cause us to do bad things. And if I go, yeah, I agree with you about that, what's your response? Like, what is it?
I'm not trying to trap you into a box. I'm saying I'm just asking a question simply to get the answer.
Yeah, there's some things that people do that other people would probably consider bad,
No, other
including
people,
myself.
I think every person has a sinful nature.
Right, of course. Everyone makes mistakes. Perfection doesn't exist. We agree on that fundamental law of reality. Perfection doesn't exist. Except we kind of don't because you believe God exists. So there's that.
Yeah, I think you actually agree with me more than you want to. I think you're angry at God.
I think I'm angry about a lot of things.
Yeah.
But
I think you are too.
Because here's the thing: is like I feel almost disorganized having to kind of ferret out some of your arguments because they come from a lot of different places.
Yeah,
you're meeting me one time, so we don't have a rapport yet, and so you're going all over and attacking all different sorts of it, right? And drilling down is kind of hard, especially when off the cuff.
I understand that.
But
I'm sorry about.
No, you don't have to apologize.
About your beliefs.
No, I would love. No, I'm not offended.
Okay, great. I'm glad. Me neither.
I believe with Spurgeon. I don't really have to defend the Bible. I just have any more than I have to defend
you're
the
a
lion.
great advertiser, and I can't wait to get my $4.99 sponge and become a big shot in the Christian world.
Yeah,
that was a bit under the table. Right?
Sorry.
That was a little bit. I don't think I need to defend Christianity or defend the Bible any more than I need to defend a lion. And again, I'm paraphrasing Spurgeon. He says, you simply uncage the lion and let it be a lion. Mm-hmm. And all I'm doing is pointing to truth, pointing to Christ.
And I'm trying to point to the truth as well.
Right.
Awesome. I've been told by our producer, Preston, to wrap it up.
To knock it off? Okay, all right.
No, that was a great conversation.
I'm
I
glad
really enjoyed
you liked
that.
it. I'm glad you liked it.
I mean it, brother. I would seriously relish the opportunity to sit down with you at any time. Okay.